At my brother's promotion dinner, I was seated at the kids' table with a tag that read, "Unemployed and unwanted." His boss laughed. "She came." I stood, turned to the CEO, and said, "I'd check your stock prices if I were you." At my brother's promotion dinner, I was seated at the kids' table. Plastic chairs, no place setting, just a flimsy paper tag taped to the corner of the tablecloth that read, "Jessica, unemployed and unwanted." Laughter rolled across the room like a wave. His boss, a broad man with a smug grin and too much cologne, pointed in my direction and chuckled. "She actually came." He said it loud enough for the whole room to hear. I stood up slowly, my wine glass still in hand. I locked eyes with the man who held my brother's career in his sweaty palms. "If I were you," I whispered, "I'd check your stock prices." The room didn't go silent. Not yet. But someone choked on their drink, and for the first time that evening, my brother stopped smiling. 6 months earlier, I wasn't unemployed. I was head of compliance for a mid-sized fintech firm. A job that demanded 12-hour days, regulatory audits, and zero room for error. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and I was good at it. I'd worked my way up from intern to department head in just 5 years. The kind of rise that doesn't come from favors or networking, but from showing up when no one else would. Weekends, holidays, late nights, all logged in spreadsheets, all for a company that told me I was family. And then one Tuesday afternoon, the CFO walked into my office and shut the door. "Jessica, this isn't personal," he said, not meeting my eyes. "We're restructuring. Your role has been consolidated." Consolidated. I had spent 5 years building that role from scratch. I packed my things in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went home, opened a bottle of wine, and stared at the blinking cursor of my untouched resume. My brother Thomas didn't call that week, didn't text, didn't ask how I was. He'd always been the golden child. Straight A's, captain of the debate team, fast-tracked into the tech world through Dad's connections. I didn't resent him, not at first. But growing up, I was always Thomas's sister. Not Jessica. Not a person with her own dreams, just an accessory to his shining resume. Still, I supported him every step of the way. I clapped the loudest at his college graduation. I bought him champagne when he landed his job at Vantage Systems. I even reviewed the fine print of his first equity agreement. Pro bono. So when I lost my job, a single message from him would have meant something. Instead, 2 weeks later, I got a glossy invitation in the mail. "You are cordially invited to celebrate Thomas Langford's promotion to executive director, hosted by Vantage Systems." The envelope was addressed to Miss Jessica Langford. No guest, no +1, just me alone. "You're not seriously going, are you?" That was Claire, my best friend since college. We were sitting on her couch, surrounded by empty takeout containers and judgment. "You don't go where you're not wanted. That's a rule." I looked at the card again. The company logo gleamed in raised ink. The venue, an exclusive rooftop overlooking downtown, the kind of place you only get access to if you're either rich, important, or someone's pawn. "Maybe I want to remind him who helped him get there," I said, folding the invitation in half. "Besides, I have nothing to lose." The night of the dinner, I wore a tailored navy dress, clean, sharp lines, hairpinned, heels that hurt like heck. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to observe. The room was filled with suits, champagne, and conversations layered in ego. People I had once emailed with, people I had helped through audits, all pretending not to recognize me. Then I saw the table, small, off to the side, decorated like a joke. Paper plates and cheap party favors like someone's idea of fun. And there it was, my place card. "Jessica, unemployed and unwanted." The words were handwritten carefully. It wasn't a mistake, it was intentional. "That's just cruel," said a quiet voice behind me. It was a woman I didn't know. An intern, maybe. Her eyes were wide. "Did they really put that on purpose?" I didn't answer. I just walked straight to the center of the room where Thomas stood, clinking his glass with a spoon. Behind him stood his boss, the man who'd laughed. "I'd like to raise a toast," Thomas was saying, "to the people who matter most." And that's when I interrupted, not loudly, just enough for the people around us to hear. "If I were you," I said to the CEO, "I'd check your stock prices." He didn't laugh this time because 2 hours later, an investor alert went out, and by Monday morning, Vantage Systems was under financial scrutiny, and I wasn't unemployed anymore. The taxi ride home, after the dinner was silent. I stared out the window while the city lights blurred past, my hands still clenched around that place card. Unemployed and unwanted. Not just a joke, a message, a declaration, one my own brother was too spineless to stop. I didn't cry, I was too focused for that. Because somewhere between the laughter and the toast, I'd remembered who I used to be. The quiet girl with the clipboard at compliance meetings. The one who caught 3 internal fraud cases in 4 years. The one who'd flagged suspicious activity that saved the firm over $9 million in fines. They thought I was invisible. And that made me dangerous. Back at home, I pulled up my old laptop, the one I hadn't opened since my termination. It was still full of bookmarked portals, SEC filings, industry databases, habits of a mind that never truly shut off. Vantage Systems. I typed it in and watched their investor site load. They'd gone public 2 years earlier. A modest IPO, respectable growth, but I remembered something about them even before that. My old company had considered partnering with them. We'd conducted due diligence, and I had seen a red flag. Back then, it had been a small detail, a discrepancy in vendor contracts and R&D allocation, too small to matter at the time. But now I had time. I had motive, and I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, Sunday, I started digging. Vantage's Q3 filings were clean, almost too clean. Consistent revenue growth, minimal losses, but the breakdown of their licensing income didn't match the patent activity I was tracking through the Federal Registry. That wasn't just odd, it was potentially misleading. They were recognizing income from software licenses that hadn't actually cleared final approval. In accounting terms, revenue pulled forward is not illegal, but unethical. And if investors found out, it could get messy. The next thing I did was simple. I took screenshots, filed PDFs, and created a burner email. Then I wrote a short anonymous tip and sent it to a watchdog blog run by ex-analysts. I didn't say much, just dropped a few numbers, a few keywords, enough to catch the eye of someone who knew what to look for. Licensing revenue discrepancies and inflated R&D valuations. Vantage Systems Q3 might be worth a second glance. No signature, just initials, JL. Monday morning, I didn't expect much, but at 9:52 a.m., my phone buzzed with a news alert. Vantage Systems facing scrutiny over Q3 reporting practices after anonymous post goes viral on finance forums. By noon, their stock had dropped 3.5%. Not a crash, not yet, but enough to spook institutional investors. At 1:16 p.m., someone emailed my old consulting site, a private equity firm I'd worked with once years ago. Jessica, not sure if you're still active, but we saw a breakdown online that looks a lot like your work. If you're open to consulting again, we have a situation that could use your eyes. And just like that, I wasn't unemployed anymore. That night Thomas called me the first time in months. "Jess," he said, his voice tight, "you were right, something's happening. We got a memo about an internal audit." I didn't answer immediately. "Did you know about this?" he asked. There it was, the suspicion, the subtle fear. "Why would I know anything, Thomas? I'm just an unwanted sister, remember?" Silence. "I didn't write that," he mumbled. "But you didn't stop it." And that, I thought, was worse. By Wednesday, Vantage Systems stock had dipped 6.2%, and reporters had started poking around. They'd received anonymous documentation, some of which had come from me. I hadn't shared anything private, no confidential files, just public records that told a very different story when looked at side by side. It wasn't about taking them down. Not yet. It was about reminding them that I see what they try to hide. By Friday, I had a new consulting contract. Short-term, high-paying. The kind of gig you land when people remember that behind the quiet compliance officer was a forensic mind. I didn't post about it, didn't gloat, but I did buy myself a decent espresso machine. Small celebrations matter when you're rebuilding. And then, just as I sat down to catch my breath, I received a LinkedIn message from Vantage's CEO. "Jessica, I'd like to speak privately if possible. I think we may have started off on the wrong foot." No apology, just a forced olive branch. I smiled because he didn't know what was coming next. The CEO thought I'd be flattered. He didn't realize the board already had my name. They weren't reaching out for small talk. They were about to make a desperate offer, and they had no idea how prepared I already was. The message from Vantage's CEO sat in my inbox all night. "Jessica, I'd like to speak privately if possible. I think we may have started off on the wrong foot. He didn't include a phone number, just a vague invitation and a calendar link. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't in the mood for rehearsed charm or corporate backpedaling, but the next morning, an email from a different name popped up. Jessica, I'm reaching out on behalf of the board. We believe your insight could be valuable in light of recent market activity. Please let me know if you're open to a confidential conversation. That name, Alina Burns, rang a bell. Former SEC auditor, now a non-executive director at Vantage. And unlike the CEO, she was someone who actually read financial statements. I replied with a short sentence. I'm available Wednesday morning. Please send the NDA. The Zoom call was scheduled for 8:30 a.m. I dressed like I was going into battle, fitted blazer, clean hair, eyes sharp. Even if they couldn't see my shoes, I wore heels. It's a mindset. When the screen blinked to life, I found myself facing not just Alina, but 3 other board members. All older, all male, all polite in that overly careful way that meant they were nervous. Thank you for joining us, Jessica, Alina said. We're aware you may have noticed certain inconsistencies in our reporting. You could say that, I replied. One of the board members leaned forward. We believe there may have been a series of oversights in how executive reports were assembled. I cut in, calmly. Oversights don't usually show patterns across 3 consecutive quarters, and they don't line up perfectly with executive stock grants. The silence on the call stretched long. One of them cleared his throat. Look, we'll be candid, Alina said. The situation is escalating. We want to bring someone in to conduct an internal review, quietly, discreetly. You want someone outside the company, I said. Someone the regulators would trust, someone with a clean record who understands both finance and compliance. They didn't say it outright, but I knew what they meant. The CEO's credibility was crumbling, and they needed someone to clean up before the real heat arrived. And you want me, I said. Alina nodded once. You flagged these patterns before anyone else. We believe you're uniquely positioned to help us contain this. It wasn't an apology. It was a job offer dressed as damage control. I asked for time to consider. I didn't need time. I ended the call and stared at my screen. This wasn't just about a consulting gig or a corporate cleanup. This was about the same man who let me be publicly humiliated, now being forced to acknowledge that I was the only person who could keep his empire from sinking. I dreamed about moments like this, but now that it was real, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt focused, ready, and dangerous. I called Claire. Let me guess, she said. They want to hire you. The board wants an internal review. Discreet quiet behind the CEO's back. And what do you want? I didn't answer right away because I wasn't sure yet. Revenge, closure, a seat at the table I'd been shoved away from. Or maybe I just wanted to remind them that ignoring people like me comes at a cost. I want the truth to have a voice, I said. Claire snorted. You sound like a movie trailer. I've been worse. That weekend, I met with Alina in person. A small cafe, no logos, no suits. She brought a folder. Inside, a preliminary scope, key personnel, initial concerns. She was careful with her words, but she didn't hide the fact that internal tensions were boiling. The CEO's been minimizing the numbers. The CFO is compliant or blind. We're not sure yet. And Thomas, I asked, sipping my coffee. Your brother, she glanced up, surprised. He's high on the internal shortlist for promotion. We assumed you knew. I froze. Promotion to what? Chief Strategy Officer if things stabilize. So that's what this was. Thomas wasn't just some bystander in a bad culture. He was being groomed to rise even further. And that changed everything. Later that night, I pulled out my old compliance journals, the ones I used to keep when I was training staff on audit integrity. A line I'd written years ago jumped out at me. Numbers don't lie, but the people who present them do. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do. When I walked into Vantage Systems that Monday morning, no one offered a welcome. There were no balloons, no introductions, no polite smiles. I wasn't an employee. I wasn't a guest. I was something else entirely. A threat they hadn't figured out how to classify yet. The board had kept my arrival confidential. I was officially hired as an external compliance consultant to assist with financial realignment. Translation, I was there to quietly examine the rot. And everyone knew it, especially Thomas. He found me in the break room around 10 o'clock a.m. Holding a mug with the company logo, I'd once celebrated for him with champagne. "Jess," he said, trying too hard to sound casual, "didn't realize you'd actually taken the job." I didn't look up from the coffee machine. "Didn't realize you were up for Chief Strategy Officer." His expression faltered for a split second. Not enough for most people to catch, but I knew my brother. I saw it. "It's not official," he said. "They're just exploring options. Options that include giving you access to long-term growth plans and financial structuring." He tensed. "You think I had something to do with the discrepancies?" "No," I said calmly. "I think you've had your head in the sand, which is almost worse." He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "Don't worry, I'm not here for revenge, Thomas. I'm here for facts, but if you're part of the numbers that don't add up, you'll be in the report, family or not." That shut him up. I spent the next 2 days combing through internal files. Unlike most consultants, I wasn't looking at the top-level summaries. I went deep into buried emails, Slack threads, and unpublished memos. The cracks were everywhere. Deferred expenses logged inconsistently. Third-party payments routed through shells with no clear deliverables. And most importantly, a pattern of strategic disclosures timed just before stock option vesting. It was textbook executive manipulation. Not enough to scream fraud yet, but more than enough to raise regulatory eyebrows. And guess whose name kept appearing in the periphery? Thomas. Not front and center, never the one signing, but often CC'd, often present, always silent. He wasn't orchestrating the schemes, but he wasn't questioning them either. He was protecting his trajectory. And suddenly, the unemployed and unwanted place card made even more sense. They tried to discredit me because they knew what I might find if I ever looked too closely. On Wednesday, I met with Alina to debrief. "The pattern is worse than I expected," I said, handing her a file. 3/4, at least 4 executives involved, and selective reporting that could expose you to serious liability if regulators catch it first. She leafed through the pages, her face tightening. "How confident are you?" "Confident enough not to care who gets uncomfortable," she nodded. "We'll need to present findings to the full board next week, quietly." "There's one more thing," I added. "Your CEO isn't just negligent. He's been consolidating internal influence, removing dissenters from decision-making, and he's trying to push my brother into a top-level role he's not qualified for." We were told Thomas was a stabilizing presence. He's a convenient presence, and I think he's being set up to take the fall. That gave her pause. "Can you prove it?" "Not yet," I said, "but I will." That night I sat in my apartment with the files spread across my table. Claire texted to check in. "How's the mission going? Found the smoking gun yet?" "No gun," I replied. "Just a slow leak in the foundation." Because here's the thing people don't understand about corruption. It's not always loud, not always dramatic. It's subtle, structural, institutionalized. And people like Thomas, they don't create corruption. They benefit from staying quiet about it. That's what made him dangerous. On Friday, I stayed late. Most of the building was empty. I logged into the shared network archive using credentials Alina had secured, and that's where I found it. A memo draft from the CEO's executive assistant. Never sent, never published. Subject line, Strategic PR Plan. Mitigating fallout from potential audit findings. In the draft, if the reporting structure becomes compromised, we suggest repositioning recent promotions, Thomas Langford as central to ongoing transparency reforms. Their proximity to internal changes allows a controlled narrative. My brother was the insurance policy, a scapegoat with a polished resume and a family name that sounded like loyalty. They were going to use him and then discard him if the heat got too close. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to protect him. The big sister instinct doesn't die easy. But then I remembered the smirk he wore when I walked out of that dinner. The silence when my name was mocked. The way he never asked if I was okay. "You made your bed, Thomas," I whispered. I received the email at 7:03 a.m. No subject line, no signature, just one sentence. "You might want to think twice before submitting that report." There was no sender listed, just a scrambled relay domain I couldn't trace without forensic tools, but I didn't need to trace it. I knew what it meant. Someone inside Vantage Systems knew what I was doing, and they wanted me to stop. I stared at the screen for a full minute before closing my laptop. Not because I was scared, because I wasn't surprised. This is what happens when people in power feel exposed. They don't confront you directly. They isolate you. They cast doubt. They push back just enough to make you hesitate. But I didn't hesitate. I got dressed. Blazer, low heels, clear mind. If they wanted me out, they'd have to do more than send a veiled threat. That morning, Alina met me in a side conference room. I showed her the email. She didn't flinch. "They're testing you," she said calmly. "It means they're scared, which means you're close." How many people knew I was compiling the report? She considered that for a moment. Only the board and Thomas. I raised an eyebrow. "You told my brother." "Not directly," she said. "But your name came up in an executive prep meeting. The CEO asked about your presence. Thomas didn't speak up either way." Of course he didn't. Silence, his favorite form of loyalty. The report was nearly done. 48 pages, detailed financial discrepancies, timelines, cross-reference transaction logs, and a breakdown of misleading disclosures, all matched with documented executive activity. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist. If regulators saw this, Vantage Systems would face formal investigation within weeks. Stock prices would drop, executives would fall, possibly charges, and at the center of it, my brother's name. Not as a criminal, but as a bystander. A silent figure in rooms where the wrong decisions were being made. Was I willing to do that? To scorch the earth, even if it meant burning him with it? That night, I left the office late again. The parking garage was nearly empty. I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat when I noticed something on the windshield. A printed piece of paper, folded once. No note, no message, just a single screenshot. A line from my report. A paragraph about Thomas, highlighted. Someone had accessed my files. Someone wanted me to know that they could get to me, or worse, that they could use my own work to discredit me. For the first time since this started, I felt it. Not fear, not guilt, clarity. They weren't just protecting a company. They were protecting themselves. And people like me, women who weren't supposed to cause problems, we were expendable. But not this time. The next day, I met Thomas in the cafe across from the office. He was already seated, phone in hand, coffee untouched. He didn't look up when I sat down. "You made your point," he said. "Everyone's talking about your presence. The CEO's furious. You've made a mess. I'm cleaning one up at my expense." I didn't blink. "You knew. You were in those meetings. You saw the numbers. That doesn't mean I caused anything." "No," I said softly. "It just means you let it happen, and now you want me to protect you." His jaw tightened. "I'm your brother, Jess. And I was your sister the night you watched them laugh at me. You said nothing then. Why should I protect you now?" He leaned forward, voice dropping. "You think exposing this will give you closure. You'll just be a footnote in another issue. No one cares about compliance consultants, Jess." I stood. "They will when she's the one who saw it all coming." I left him there, his coffee untouched, his future unraveling. That evening, I finalized the report. I added one final section, a summary of recommendations, including immediate removal of executive leadership and referral to external regulators. Then I attached the memo, encrypted the files, and hit send. Not to the board, to an external legal team that had worked with federal auditors. Whistleblower protection included. Because if they were going to try to erase me, I'd make sure I left a trail too loud to ignore. The following morning, I received a call. Not from Thomas, not from Alina, from a journalist. "Jessica Langford, I'm covering internal whistleblower claims at Vantage Systems. Your name came up. Can we talk?" I didn't answer immediately because I wasn't ready to go public. Not yet. But the fact that he had my name meant someone was leaking things already, either to shield themselves or to blame me. 2 days after I submitted the report, the CEO called an emergency leadership alignment meeting. Translation: damage control. He booked the entire top floor of the Vantage Systems building. Private dining room, catered breakfast, long oak conference table, the same space they'd used for Thomas's promotion dinner. I walked in exactly at 8:59 a.m. Report binder in one hand and silence wrapped around me like armor. The room was full. Executives, board members, department heads, and Thomas. He was seated near the end in a tailored suit, flipping through his phone like nothing was wrong. The CEO stood at the head of the table, a tight smile stretched across his face. "Jessica," he said, "thanks for joining us. We're here to realign on strategy after your recent documentation." He didn't say investigation. He didn't say a whistleblower report. But everyone in the room knew. They'd read the report. They'd seen the charts, the memos, the discrepancies. They were scared, and they should have been. "You've caused quite a stir," the CEO continued, still smiling. "So we thought we'd let you clarify a few things. Set the record straight before rumors take hold." I smiled back, calm, professional. "You mean before regulators read the article that's going live in 2 hours?" His face twitched. "Excuse me." "A journalist reached out," I said, setting the binder on the table. I verified what I could. The rest, they confirmed themselves. Internal leaks, former staff, investor correspondence. The room shifted, chairs creaked, coffee cups paused midair, eyes darted between faces. "Jessica," Elena said gently, "are you sure?" "You hired me to tell the truth," I said, "and the truth doesn't belong in a drawer." I opened the binder. "Let's walk through a few highlights, shall we?" Page 1. Quarterly financial reporting inconsistencies, revenue recognition manipulation. Page 2. Executive stock timing patterns preceding market announcements. Page 3. Projected use of Thomas Langford as strategic fall guy in internal comms. I didn't look at him. Not yet. I let the words hang. The CEO shifted in his seat. "Now hold on. That's speculation." "It's your assistant's memo," I said. "Page 31. Your notes are in the margins. Shall I read them?" He went quiet. Then I turned to Thomas, slowly, deliberately. "You could have stopped this months ago. You were in the room. You saw the numbers. You knew what they were doing." He didn't respond, but his hands clenched. "And instead of speaking up, you stood by while they humiliated me at your promotion dinner." "I didn't write that place card," he muttered. "No," I said, "you just watched me sit down in front of it." The room was frozen. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, and I handed Elena a sealed envelope. "My resignation, effective immediately. I've accepted a full-time role at a firm that values ethical oversight and its analysts." I turned to the board. "But I'm also submitting a final recommendation. Replace your CEO within 72 hours, or I go public under my real name." That did it. The CEO's mouth opened, ready to bark a response, but Elena raised her hand before he could speak. "That won't be necessary," she said, voice even. "We've already drafted a transition plan. Jessica, thank you for your service." I gathered my things. As I reached the door, I paused, turned, and looked at the man who had once called me a gold-digger nobody. "Oh," I said to the CEO, "one last thing. I'd check your stock prices if I were you." And this time, the room went silent. 3 weeks later, the headline read, "Vantage CEO steps down amid financial review. Whistleblower report triggers board action." The article didn't name me, but it didn't need to. My phone buzzed nonstop. Former colleagues, analysts, even investors asking if I was available for advisory work. I wasn't. I'd already signed on as Director of Regulatory Strategy at a firm 3 times the size of Vantage, with better ethics and a healthier coffee budget. 1 month later, Claire and I sat on a rooftop watching the sun dip behind the skyline. "So," she said, raising her glass, "what now?" "Now," I smiled. "Now I stop shrinking." "And Thomas," I shrugged. "Still at Vantage. Different office, smaller window, no promotion, no headline. Do you think he regrets it?" "He doesn't have to," I said. "His silence already said enough." This story isn't about revenge. It's about recognition. The kind that doesn't come with applause, but with the quiet power of knowing you were right all along. To every woman who's been dismissed, belittled, or underestimated, let them laugh. Let them place you at the kids' table. Then smile and build the table they'll one day beg to sit at.